Today, we dive into the do's and don'ts of time travel from the perspective of various movies. Let's be honest, all of us have wished we could go back in time, maybe to change a few things or simply to observe. Well, some creative individuals actually managed to depict what it would look like on the screens. They created films that will help us understand what time travel could feel like, and what its potential risks could be. Some of these films will leave us wondering, can one really change the past? So buckle up, as this is going to be a very tumultuous journey, not only because of the paradoxes involved with time travel, but also because of the different paces of each film, with the most unique storylines in the history of science fiction films. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin.
Engines up!
Interstellar, 2014. After humanity is on the brink of extinction because of a global blight, Joseph Cooper, a former NASA test pilot, becomes a farmer along with his son and daughter, Tom and Murph, and his father-in-law, Donald. After a dust storm creates mysterious patterns in falling particles, Cooper and Murph reach a secret NASA facility by decoding the pattern. They find Dr. John Brand, a scientist there, and Cooper is asked to pilot the spaceship Endurance through a wormhole that's been discovered near Saturn. Cooper decides to leave, hoping to save his kid's generation from extinction. But Murph is distraught. There are 4 people on the mission, including Brand's daughter, Amelia. The mission is to find another inhabitable planet for humanity, but things get tough when, after years of travel, the team arrives at a planetary system circling a supermassive black hole called Gargantua, which results in time dilation due to gravity stretching time. In one of the events, Coop and other members go to a planet that is inhospitable, where spending 1 hour equals 7 years on Earth. Going there and returning causes 23 years to pass on Earth. Toward the end of the movie, Coop helps Amelia by charting a gravity assist path around Gargantua toward the last planet candidate. He sacrifices himself and a robot named TARS by detaching themselves from Endurance and making it lighter, resulting in them falling into a black hole. To their surprise, inside it, they find a 4-dimensional cube that allows them to send a message to adult Murph, who was working for Dr. Brand. This message enables her to solve the gravity manipulation equation, allowing humanity to be transported to an inhabitable world around Saturn. The cube then ejects Coop and TARS, where they are rescued, but 89 years have passed. Coop is now reunited with his now elderly daughter while he hasn't aged. Murph tells Coop to seek Amelia, and Coop leaves with TARS. Meanwhile, we see Amelia breathing the air of a new habitable planet.
They gave me contact lenses. I'd never seen the world so clearly.
Predestination, 2014. In 1975, an agent tries to stop a bombing in NYC by a serial bomber named Fizzle Bomber, but fails. The bomb detonates, which burns his face, but a mysterious man hands him his time travel plan, which he uses to go to his employer's facility in 1992, called the Temporal Bureau. His recovery involves surgeries that change his voice and face. The doctor also diagnoses but never reveals that the agent is suffering from psychosis and depression. He's then sent on his final mission to 1970, where he meets a man named John. John then tells his life story to the agent. John was born intersex and raised female in the Cleveland orphanage. His name was Jane. She fell in love with a man who impregnated her and disappeared. During the birth of the baby, due to complications, they changed her sex and performed a hysterectomy. Amidst this, her baby was mysteriously abducted. She hated her lover, chose John as her name, and relocated to NYC. There, the agent asked him to take over his job in exchange for taking revenge on her lover. They travel to 1963. John realizes he fell in love with himself when he was Jane, and made a child. John is then told by the agent that he must leave to complete the mission, while the agent discreetly travels to 1964, abducting the baby and bringing her to Cleveland in 1945. This meant that Jane, John, and the baby were all the same person. The agent has created a time travel paradox problem. Now we come to Fizzle Bomber. The problem is that in 1992, Fizzle Bomber will strike again, killing over 11,000 people. Later, it's revealed that Fizzle Bomber is the agent. His mind has been twisted, and he thinks that by bombing some people, he's saving countless lives in alternate futures. The agent, however, vows that his future will be different, so he shoots the Fizzle Bomber. As the film ends, a tape recording of a message left by the agent for John is played, in which he wonders if the future can really be changed. Source code 2011. After Coulter Stevens, a U.S. Army pilot, wakes up on a train going to Chicago, he feels confused, as his last memory is of flying a mission in Afghanistan. However, his friend Christina Warren and all the reflections on any surface say he's a school teacher. Sean Fentress. As he expresses his discombobulation, the train explodes and everyone on board dies. This happens about half a dozen times, with Stephen's only mission being to identify the bomber. It's later revealed by his employer, Captain Colleen Goodwin, that he died a couple of months ago and he's missing most of his body. His brain is dead, with a very small part of his brain reliving the last 8 minutes of the passenger's memories. This is being done via an experimental method. Therefore, the only thing that matters is to find the bomber to prevent a second attack in Chicago. Eventually, due to a fallen wallet, Stevens identifies the bomber, who's a nihilistic domestic terrorist, Derek Frost. The bomber kills both Christina and Stevens, but as Stevens comes back, he tells all of this information, which helps the attacker get arrested and prevent the second attack. Goodwin is congratulated, but he wants to die. However, Colleen backs off on her promise, because Stevens is the only person who's able to access the source code. But then Colleen sympathizes with him and sends him back one last time, promising to unplug the life support. This time, he asks Christina out for a date, defuses the bomb, reports Frost to the police, calls his father, and reconciles with him under a guise. After 8 minutes, Goodwin terminates Stevens' life support, but his world doesn't end after 8 minutes, confirming that the source code isn't just a simulation, but a machine that allows him to create alternate timelines. The Terminator, 1984. An artificially intelligent network called Skynet, invented by Cyberdyne Systems, becomes self-aware. When humans try to deactivate it, it retaliates in self-defense, triggering a nuclear war. This is all happening in 2029, and a cyborg named T-800 is sent back to 1984 Los Angeles. It is an assassin known as a Terminator, who is disguised as a male human and is programmed to assassinate a woman named Sarah Connor. The reason is that Sarah's future son John will lead a successful resistance with the survivors against Skynet and their mechanical forces. So killing Sarah would prevent the birth of John. Simultaneously, a human soldier named Kyle Reese is sent to protect her. After the Terminator goes on a murder spree, killing many Sarahs before he reaches the target, Reese rescues her. He explains everything to her while they're on the run, and eventually confesses that he came back in time because he saw a Polaroid of her and fell for her. She reciprocates his feelings, and they make love in a motel, conceiving John. This creates a Predestination Paradox. After the Terminator finds them, they use numerous pipe bombs, which end up revealing the metal exoskeleton of the Terminator. Reese uses the last pipe bomb, which blows the Terminator apart, but Reese loses his life. The Terminator's fully functioning torso tries to attack Sarah, but she manages to destroy it by luring him into a hydraulic press. Months later, Sarah is visibly pregnant and is recording audio tapes for John to listen to as she travels to Mexico, when a guy at a gas station clicks a Polaroid of her. This happens to be the exact Polaroid that John gives Reese in the future. The owner of the gas station states that there's a storm brewing, and Sarah responds by saying she's aware. This indicates the impending war between Skynet and humanity, and she drives toward it. The Butterfly Effect, 2004. This movie is about a guy named Evan who suffers from amnesia because of the psychologically traumatic incidents he's been through. His friends Lenny, Kaylee, and Kaylee's brother Tommy have also suffered trauma. He starts to keep detailed journals of his life as a coping mechanism against amnesia. When he's in college, he discovers that he has the ability to time travel by reading the journals, and those gaps in his memory are his older self's consciousness taking over. After numerous futile attempts at trying to spare himself and his friends from the awful futures they have, he ends up in a future where the journals don't exist. Eventually, he realizes that if he keeps altering the past, neither he nor his friends will ever have good futures. So he finds an old home movie he'd made and travels back in time one last time. There, he is intentionally mean to Kaylee, which results in her and Tommy living with their mother in a different neighborhood. This results in them having happy lives. He then comes back to the present and burns the videos in his journals to avoid altering the timeline again. Years later, in NYC, Evan passes Kaylee on the street, and despite a brief exchange of looks, they keep walking. Primer, 2004. Abe and Aaron are two engineers. Their research one day makes them realize they've created something. Abe explains to Aaron that he's already been time traveling. The way time travel works in this movie is that the machine, referred to as the box, has to be turned on to a given time for a person to go back to that time. For example, if the machine is turned on at 12 p.m. on Monday, then it is left to run for 6 hours. Then you get in the time machine at 3 and get back in time to when the machine started at 12 a.m. With this knowledge, you can alternate the 6 hours. Abe and Aaron do this to do stock marketing, but eventually, time traveling back and forth for days constantly has hazardous effects on their health. Their days become 36 hours long, including the time spent in the box, so they're physically exhausted and experiencing ear bleeds and fainting. In the end, Aaron is shown as having created a huge version of the machine. The movie ends on an open-ended note, as due to traveling back and forth, Abe and Aaron have created paradoxes and multiple versions of themselves. Edge of Tomorrow, 2014. A race of aliens called the Mimics land in Germany and take over most of continental Europe, killing millions. They're one giant interconnected organism, with the alpha mimicking being bigger and acting as a central nervous system. The brain would be the omega mimic. Whenever an alpha mimic dies, the omega mimic turns back the clock for 24 hours, keeping all their collective knowledge and giving the rest of the mimics time to adjust to new strategies, ensuring their victory. In 5 years, a global military alliance called the United Defense Force was created to combat the mimics. Rita Vrataski, a celebrated sergeant, was keeping a secret. She'd been living in a time loop because when she first fought, she died, but she ended up killing an alpha with her, which bonded with her blood. Then she died multiple times until she started succeeding. She also started to experience visions of Omega. She decided to follow and kill it so that the UDF could win, but ended up being badly wounded and in need of a blood transfusion, which made her lose her looping abilities and also her vision. Later, Cage, a soldier who had no idea what he was doing, received the same ability by killing an alpha on his first day of battle. Together, Rita and Cage make numerous attempts at killing the alpha, but eventually, due to a blood transfusion given to Cage, they believe he lost the ability and are more careful since they're on their last life. When they reach the Louvre Pyramid in Paris, where the Omega is located, they recruit the J Squad to help them. The J Squad members end up sacrificing themselves. Rita dies too. Eventually, Cage manages to kill an alpha and blow up the Omega before he dies, which resets time, but since the Omega can't reset his own death, it dies along with all the mimics. To Cage's surprise, he survives and wakes up to the news that the mimics have died. Back to the Future, 1985. This movie is about a guy named Marty in 1985, living with his depressed alcoholic mother Lorraine, his older siblings, who aren't doing well socially or professionally, and his timid and underconfident father George, who's bullied by his supervisor Biff. Marty's band audition fails, which leads him to confide in his girlfriend Jennifer. That night, Marty meets his scientist friend Doc, who tells Marty that he just created a time machine that runs on plutonium that he stole from Libyan terrorists. Doc enters the date November 5, 1955 on the time machine, but the terrorists gun him down. Marty tries to flee in the time machine, accidentally activating it and reaching the past. There, Marty has to play matchmaker for his parents so that he isn't erased from existence, and in the event of saving Lorraine, George beats Biff, and Lorraine and George share their first kiss while Marty performs on stage. He then finds Doc, and the only thing that can power the time machine is a lightning bolt. Young Doc helps Marty get back to the future, where everything is better, and due to Marty's letter, the Doc in 1985 is wearing a bulletproof vest and is saved. Then Doc goes to 2015. Marty discovers his father is successful, and everything is good with his mom and siblings, and he reunites with Jennifer. As he does so, Doc returns, insisting they must travel with him to the future, to save their children from terrible outcomes.
4 beasts gave unto the 7 angels 7 golden vials full of the
12 Monkeys. In 1996, a deadly virus wiped out nearly all of humanity, forcing the survivors to go underground. The army of the 12 Monkeys is believed to have released the virus. By 2035, James Cole, a prisoner in an underground Philadelphia compound, is chosen to travel back in time to locate the original virus for scientists to develop a cure. Haunted by dreams of a foot chase and an airport shooting, Cole arrives in 1990 instead of 1996, where he's arrested and sent to a mental hospital under Dr. Catherine Rayleigh's care. There, he meets Jeffrey Goins, an extreme environmentalist. After an escape attempt, Cole is sedated but disappears. Reawakening in 2035, the scientists interrogate him, presenting evidence linking the virus to the army of the 12 Monkeys, and send him back in time. By being sent back and forth to the wrong time with bad information, he realizes he accidentally gave Goins the idea of wiping out humanity with a stolen virus. But the 12 Monkeys aren't the culprit. By the time the real culprit is found and Cole tries to kill him, the police intervene, and he dies trying to save the world. This is witnessed by young Cole, who will have nightmares about this incident. The movie ends by implying that traveling to the past does nothing to change the future. The Time Machine, 2002. After a mugger kills his fiancée Emma, Dr. Alexander Hartigan devotes his time to building a time machine so that he can travel to the past and save her in 1903. He saves her, only for her to die of something else, making him realize that even if he saves her, she will die of other circumstances. He goes to 2030 to see if they've discovered how to change the past, but to no avail. He then goes to 2037 and realizes accidental destruction of the moon by lunar colonists has happened, which is making Earth uninhabitable. As he restarts the machine, he goes forward 800,000 years to a healed Earth, and humans that have reverted to primitive lifestyles. The humans who survived above the surface are called Eloi, while the ones who started living underground are called Morlocks, who are ruled by Uber Morlocks. Mara, an Eloy who speaks English, nurses Alexander back to health. She's then captured by the Morlocks, who use Eloy as food and breeding vessels. He tries to rescue her, but an Uber Morlock explains to Alexander that he can't save Emma because her dying was what made Alexander build the time machine, and if she doesn't die, it would create a temporal paradox. After fighting and killing the Uber Morlock and traveling thousands of years into the future, he realizes he cannot save Emma, so instead he chooses to go back and save Mara. He succeeds in doing so while destroying the Morlocks. He accepts this new world as his new life and helps educate other Eloy. The Cloverfield Paradox, 2018. Earth is suffering from a global energy crisis. This leads to space agencies around the world testing an experimental particle accelerator called the Shepherd, located on the orbiting Cloverfield space station. The Shepherd could provide infinite energy, while conspiracy theorists believe it'll create the Cloverfield Paradox and unleash unimaginable horrors on Earth. After 2 years of failing to activate the Shepherd, the crew manages to get a stable beam. But what it does instead is put them in an alternate reality where their Earth has disappeared. Strange things start taking place after this event. A woman named Jensen appears, claiming she's part of the crew. Another member named Volkov starts going mad, and Mundy's arm vanishes, which then reappears with a mind of its own. Meanwhile, Hamilton, one of the crew members, tries to get them home. Turns out Jensen was trying to make Shepard stay in her own universe. Hamilton shoots a window after Jensen kills one member and badly wounds another. This causes Jensen to be sucked into the vacuum. Hamilton and the other survivor, Schmidt, manage to power up the particle accelerator again and use an escape pod to finally return to their Earth. But in the last scene, we see Hamilton's Michael, horrified, telling them not to come back as a monster's head bursts through the clouds. Timeline 2003. Professor Edward Johnston leads an archaeological study of the village of Castlegarde, France, and the hanging site of Lady Claire in 1357, Arnaud de Serval. Her martyrdom led to France winning the 100 Years' War against the English. His team includes André Merrick, Johnston's students Kate, Josh, Francois, and his son Chris. They go to a place where they discover a sarcophagus with a knight and his lady, an unusual find for the era. Johnston travels to ITC Corporation, suspecting tampering, while his team finds a 600-year-old note from him asking for help. ITC reveals their teleportation technology and a stable wormhole to 1357, where Johnston is stuck. Students Kate, Chris, Francois, and security team members travel back to rescue him. In 1357, the team faces English knights, losing security members in the process. They're captured by Lord Oliver de Vannes and his lieutenant, De Caire, who turns out to be a former ITC employee who hates the ITC now. Francois is killed, but the others escape with the help of Lady Claire, whose rescue alters history. Merrick, attracted to Claire, learns he's destined to be the knight in the sarcophagus. The group helps turn the tide of the battle in favor of the French. Merrick chooses to stay in the past, ensuring that history remains intact. The others return to the present, discovering that ITC's president Doniger sabotaged their efforts to avoid financial loss from their story. Doniger is inadvertently sent back to 1357 and presumably killed by a charging knight. Back in the present, the team finds Merrick and Lady Claire leading a prosperous life, having 3 children named Christophe, Catherine, and Francois. Looper 2012. In 2044, 25-year-old Joe works for a crime syndicate as an assassin, or looper. Since in 2074, the tracking systems have made it impossible for bodies to be disposed of undetected, the syndicate sends their enemies back in time to be killed. Loopers receive silver bars attached to their target's body as payment. To hide any connections to the syndicate, any loopers who survive until 2074 are sent back to be killed by their own younger selves, which is called closing the loop. When Joe's next target arrives, it's his older self. Old Joe knocks him out and escapes. In a different timeline, Joe does kill his older self and moves to Shanghai, but due to his vices, he burns through his savings in 6 years, which leads him to be a hitman. 17 years later, he marries and manages to break the addiction with the help of his wife. 7 years later, his wife ends up being killed when he's taken to close the loop. Old Joe goes back to 2044, meets his younger self, and is informed that someone called a Rainmaker is going to overthrow the 5 main bosses. So in order to save his wife, he must find the Rainmaker as a child and kill him. When they find a kid named Sid and his mother Sarah, both of them are revealed to possess telekinetic powers. Young Joe realizes that if Old Joe kills Sarah, Sid will grow up to become the Rainmaker, so he commits suicide, erasing Old Joe's existence, saving Sarah, and preventing Sid from becoming the Rainmaker.
What are you doing? You're gonna eat him, Maggie!
Pandorum 2009. As the Earth is dying, in a desperate attempt to save humanity, The people of Earth send a ship with thousands of people on it in order to go to a new habitable planet. The crew members begin to awaken with no idea of who they are, where they are, or what's going on, which are probably the effects of long-term hibernation. Bauer is the first one to wake up from his hibernation. The crew was working in 2-year shifts, and the problem that occurred was that Crew 4 didn't do that with no power on the ship. Then we see alien-like creatures that hunt the hibernation sleep pods and eat the colonists. It's eventually revealed that around 800 years have passed since they arrived on the planet, and after a long battle with the humans while trying to power up the spaceship, Nadia, another passenger, and Bauer spot bioluminescent life. The alien-like things were actually mutated humans who had to adapt to living in the darkness after the power went out. Then the ship is flooded by Bauer as he accidentally breaks a window before climbing into an escape pod. The breach triggers an emergency protocol that triggers all the escape pods to eject to the surface, revealing a beautiful planet. Tenet, 2020. The protagonist leads a CIA extraction during a terrorist siege at an opera house in Kyiv, where he is saved by an unknown operative with a red trinket. Captured and tortured, he takes a fake suicide pill and is recruited by Tenet, a secret organization dealing with objects moving backward through time. Partnering with his handler Neil, they trace these objects to arms dealer Priya Singh in Mumbai, who reveals Russian oligarch Andrei Sator is in contact with the future. Sator's wife Kat is blackmailed over a forged Goya painting. The protagonist and Neil attempt to steal the Goya, but encounter masked men from a time inversion device called a turnstile. This device makes objects and people travel back in time. They learn Sator's men sabotage the CIA mission for plutonium. Kat introduces the protagonist to Sator, who agrees to help steal the plutonium. In Tallinn, they're ambushed by an inverted Sator, who later captures them and shoots Kat with an inverted bullet. Tenet troops rescue them, and they invert themselves to save Kat. The protagonist travels back to retrieve the artifact, but Sator takes it. They learn that Sator has 9 pieces of the algorithm to invert the world's entropy. On the 14th, Tenet uses a temporal pincer movement to recover it. Kat keeps Sator alive until the mission succeeds, and she kills him just as the protagonist and Ives escape with the algorithm. Neil reveals he was recruited by a future protagonist. The protagonist then prevents Priya from killing Kat, realizing he created Tenet. Marvelous verdict. So these were some of the most mind-bending sci-fi films, with complicated plots revolving around time travel and its dangers. I say, let's not meddle with the fourth dimension that we know nothing about, and keep it in our imagination with books and movies. If we've learned anything, it's that time should not be played with, unless you want dire consequences. Until next time, and if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks everyone!
You